Roy Vexler stood at his kitchen counter, staring at the refrigerated box that had arrived an hour ago. The delivery man had been specific about keeping it cold, making Roy sign twice and show ID. Now the white pastry box sat before him like a riddle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. The card attached was simple cream-colored paper with May's familiar handwriting. Her letters still curved the same way they had when she used to leave notes in his lunchbox. In "Oh Hard Feelings." To your next chapter. May Roy turned the card over twice, searching for hidden meaning in the empty space. May Holloway Vexler didn't do simple gestures. She calculated every move, every word, every smile. 3 months since she'd walked out claiming she needed space. And now this. What's up, you looking like someone sent you a bomb? Darla's voice cut through his thoughts. His mother stood in the doorway, still wearing her gardening gloves and carrying the sharp smell of fresh soil. At 66, Darla Vexler moved with the same quick efficiency that had made her one of the best ICU nurses at Portland General before she retired. Her gray hair was pulled back in its usual no-nonsense ponytail, and her dark eyes missed nothing. Package for May. Roy gestured toward the box. Darla's expression hardened. She'd never liked May. Not from the first day Roy brought her home 5 years ago. His mother had a sixth sense for people who wore masks, probably from dealing with so many lying patients and worried families over the years. What's the witch want now? Apparently to wish me well. Roy opened the box carefully. Inside was a chocolate cake that looked like it cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. Dark chocolate ganache covered every inch, with delicate sugar work forming tiny flowers around the edges. The kind of cake May would order from that expensive bakery downtown, the one where she used to meet her book club friends. Well, I'll be damned. Darla pulled off her gloves and washed her hands at the sink. May Holloway spending money on someone other than herself. Mark this day on the calendar. Roy studied the cake. Perfect presentation, professional decoration, probably cost $200 or more. May was many things, but wasteful with money wasn't one of them. Every purchase served a purpose. You think it's safe to eat? The question came out before he could stop it. Darla laughed, a short bark that held no humor. Boy, you sound paranoid. Even May's not crazy enough to poison a cake. She paused, then looked at him more seriously. Are you? Roy considered it. May have been acting strange the last few months before she left. Distant in new ways, secretive about her phone, defensive when he asked simple questions. And those dinners that left him feeling sick. No, he said finally. Just wondering why she'd spend this kind of money. Maybe her conscience finally kicked in. Darla opened the kitchen drawers until she found a cake server. Or maybe she's trying to buy her way back into your good graces. Either way, I'm not letting good chocolate go to waste. She cut 2 generous slices, the knife sliding through the rich layers like butter. The inside was just as impressive as the outside dark chocolate cake with what looked like raspberry filling and chocolate mousse. Roy took a small bite. Rich, complex flavors that probably took hours to create. May always did have expensive taste. Darla ate with more enthusiasm, making small sounds of appreciation. I'll give the woman credit, she knows how to pick dessert. This is restaurant quality. They ate in comfortable silence, Darla finishing her slice and cutting herself another. Roy picked at his, mind still turning over May's unexpected gesture. The note bothered him more than the cake itself. No hard feelings, as if she was the one who'd been wronged, as if walking out on their marriage was something he should just accept and move on from. You want some wine with this? Darla asked, already moving toward the cabinet where Roy kept a few bottles. I'm good. You go ahead. She poured herself a glass of red wine, something she developed a taste for since retirement. Roy watched her savor the combination of chocolate and wine, completely relaxed for the first time in months. May's departure had been hard on Darla, too. She'd lost a daughter-in-law she'd never trusted but had learned to tolerate, and gained a son who was quieter and more withdrawn than before. This is exactly what I needed after wrestling with those rose bushes all afternoon, Darla said, cutting herself a 3rd slice. My back's killing me, but at least I'll die happy. Roy managed a small smile. His mother had always dealt with stress through food and gardening, sometimes both at once. Tonight she was indulging in the food part with obvious pleasure. They talked about ordinary things: Darla's garden, Roy's work at the logistics company, the neighbor's new fence that was 3 inches over the property line. Normal conversation that felt good after months of careful topics and avoided subjects. By 9 o'clock, Darla had finished half the cake and most of the bottle of wine. She was telling a story about one of her former patients when she stopped mid-sentence, her hand going to her chest. "You okay?" Roy asked. "Just." She pressed her palm flat against her breastbone. "Tight feeling. Probably ate too much cake." But Roy could see something else in her expression. As a nurse, Darla had developed the ability to assess symptoms quickly and accurately. The way she was breathing, shallow and controlled, wasn't about overreading. "Ma, my pulse feels strange." She found her wrist with 2 fingers counting. Too slow, then too fast. Roy stood up, sudden alarm cutting through the comfortable evening. "What do you mean, strange?" Darla was already moving toward the hall closet where she kept her purse. "I'm going to urgent care. I'll drive you." "No." Her voice was firm, the same tone she'd used when he was 12 and tried to argue about bedtime. "You stay here. I know what I'm doing." She was out the door before he could argue further, leaving Roy standing in the kitchen with half a chocolate cake and a growing sense that something was very wrong. Roy's phone rang at 7:30 the next morning. May's name on the caller ID made his stomach tighten. She never called this early. May wasn't a morning person, never had been. "Hello, May." "Roy." Her voice sounded casual, almost cheerful. "How are you doing?" The question struck him as odd. They'd barely spoken since she moved out, and when they did, it was about practical things like mail forwarding and insurance paperwork. May didn't call to ask how he was doing. "I'm fine. What do you need?" "Nothing specific. I just..." She paused, and he could hear traffic in the background. "I was thinking about you yesterday, wondering how you were." Roy waited. May never called without a purpose. "So," she continued, her tone staying light, "how was the cake?" There it was, the real reason for the call. "It was good. Thank you. Did you enjoy it? I mean, really enjoy it?" Something in her voice made him pause, an eagerness that didn't match her casual tone. "My mother ate most of it," Roy said. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. "May." "She what?" May's voice had changed completely. The cheerful tone was gone, replaced by something sharper. "She ate most of it. You know how she is with chocolate." Another long pause. Roy could hear May's breathing, quick and shallow. "Wait." May's voice was different now, strained. "She ate all of it? Are you serious?" "Not all of it. I had some too. But yeah, she ate most of it." "What?" The line went quiet except for traffic sounds. Then May spoke again, her voice shaken in a way Roy had never heard before. "Roy, I have to go. I'll call you later." She hung up. Roy stared at his phone, replaying the conversation. May's reaction didn't make sense. Surprised that someone ate the cake she'd sent? Panic when she learned it was Darla instead of him? His phone rang again. This time, it was his mother. "Roy, I'm still at the hospital." "What? Are you okay?" "I'm fine now, but you need to hear this." Darla's voice was steady, but he could hear the underlying tension. "They ran toxicology tests because of my symptoms last night." "Roy, there was digoxin in my blood." "What's digoxin?" "Heart medication. Used to slow down rapid heartbeat. Problem is, I don't take heart medication, and I've never been prescribed digoxin in my life." Roy felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How did it get in your blood?" "That's what I asked. Doctor says it had to be ingested somehow. And when you mix it with alcohol..." Darla paused. "Roy, if I'd eaten more of that cake, or if I'd been someone with existing heart problems, the combination with wine could have caused cardiac arrest." The kitchen seemed to shift around Roy. The remaining cake on the counter, the wine bottle, May's phone call asking specifically about the cake. "The cake," he said. "That's my thinking too. I ate most of it, drank wine with it, and ended up in the emergency room with heart medication in my system that I never took." Roy's mind was working fast now, connecting pieces he'd been avoiding for months. "Ma, I need you to save that toxicology report. Already got copies." "Roy," Darla's voice was grim. "I've been a nurse for 40 years. I know the difference between an accident and attempted murder." After hanging up, Roy sat at his kitchen table and thought. Really thought without the emotional confusion that had clouded his judgment for months about May's behavior the last year. The dinners that left him feeling sick twice, he remembered now. Both times May had insisted he try something special she'd made. Both times she'd pushed wine with dinner. He'd attributed the nausea to stress from work or something he'd eaten at lunch. May refusing intimacy, claiming she was tired or stressed. May disappearing for days at a time, saying she needed space to think. May's sudden interest in their finances, asking questions about his life insurance policy. May who called this morning specifically to ask about the cake. May who panicked when she learned the wrong person had eaten it. Roy didn't panic. Panic was useless, emotional, wasteful. Instead, he did what he'd always done when faced with a problem. He started planning. Roy opened his laptop and created a new document. At the top, he wrote timeline and began reconstructing the past year methodically. March 15th dinner at home. May made lamb with mint sauce. Insisted I try the wine she'd selected specifically for the dish. Felt nauseated and dizzy within an hour. May suggested I might be getting the flu. July 22nd, another special dinner. May had been unusually attentive all day, suggesting we needed to reconnect. Made beef Wellington, her most complicated recipe. Again, with wine pairing. Again, sick within the hour. May stayed up taking care of me, bringing water and aspirin. Roy paused, remembering. May playing the caring wife while he suffered from symptoms she might have caused. The thought made his jaw clench. September through November, May becomes distant. Refuses intimacy, claims she's stressed about her mother's health. Spends increasing time away from home, sometimes overnight. December, May asks detailed questions about my life insurance policy. Claims she's trying to organize our finances for the new year. February, May announces she needs space. Moves in with her sister temporarily. March, May files for legal separation. Yesterday, cake delivery with May's note. Roy leaned back in his chair. 3 months since May left, claiming she needed time to figure out what she wanted. 3 months to plan whatever this was. His phone rang. May again. Roy let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Roy. I've been thinking about our conversation this morning. May's voice was controlled now, back to the careful tone she used when she was trying to manage a situation. About the cake. What about it? Well, I just realized I never asked if you enjoyed it. I mean, I spent quite a bit on it, and I wanted to make sure it was worth the money. Roy said nothing. Roy, I heard you. So? Did you like it? It was fine. May's breathing was audible over the phone. Just fine? I specifically requested their best chocolate cake. The woman at the bakery said it was their signature dessert. Which bakery? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Oh, that place downtown. You know, the expensive one. What's it called? What does it matter? Just curious. You said you spent quite a bit on it. Another pause. I don't remember the exact name. Something French. Roy knew every bakery in the downtown area. May was lying. Well, Roy said, like I told you, my mother ate most of it. Right. May's voice was tight. Your mother. She really enjoyed it. Had 3 pieces with wine. Silence. May, I'm glad she liked it. The words sounded forced. I should go. I have an appointment. She hung up again. Roy added to his timeline. May calls twice, specifically asking about cake consumption. Lies about which bakery when pressed for details. Becomes upset when told Darla ate most of it. The pattern was clear now. May hadn't sent him a birthday cake. She'd sent him a weapon, carefully crafted and precisely dosed. The message wasn't about forgiveness or new chapters. It was supposed to be his last meal. Roy closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen window. Outside, life continued normally. Neighbors walking dogs, children playing in yards, ordinary people doing ordinary things. None of them knew that someone had just tried to murder him and accidentally poisoned his mother instead. The strangest part was how calm he felt. No rage, no betrayal, no emotional breakdown. Just cold, clear understanding and the beginning of a plan. May had made one critical mistake. She'd showed her hand too early, calling to check if her poison had worked. Now Roy knew exactly what he was dealing with. And May had no idea that he knew in logistics. The key to solving any problem was information. Gather data, analyze patterns, identify resources, execute solutions. Roy had spent 15 years coordinating complex supply chains, managing variables, anticipating problems before they occurred. May thought she was playing chess against someone who didn't know the game had started. She was wrong. Roy called Jules Reamer from his office the next morning. In 15 years of friendship, Jules had never failed to come through when Roy needed help, and he never asked unnecessary questions. That combination of loyalty and discretion made him invaluable. "What's up, Roy? I need a favor. Personal matter. Name it. I need you to call some bakeries. Tell them you're a corporate buyer looking for a supplier for executive events. Ask about their signature chocolate cakes, pricing, ordering procedures." Jules was quiet for a moment. "Any particular bakeries?" "Start with the high-end places downtown. I'm looking for someone who recently filled a special order expensive chocolate cake, probably ordered and paid for in the last week." "What am I really looking for?" Roy appreciated that Jules didn't pretend this was about corporate catering. "Payment information. Who placed the order, how they paid, any unusual requests." "Got it. Anything else?" "Yeah. If you find the right place, see if they keep customer information on file. Order history, contact details, that kind of thing. I'll call you back within 2 hours." True to his word, Jules called back 90 minutes later. "Found your bakery. Artisan Desserts on Morrison Street. They had a special order placed last week, chocolate ganache cake with raspberry filling, premium decoration. Cost $230. Who placed the order?" Here's where it gets interesting. Order was placed by phone by a woman who said her name was May Vexler, but the payment was made with a credit card belonging to someone else. Roy felt his pulse quicken. "Who?" "Dr. Rowan Kane. I told them I might want to send a thank you note to whoever recommended their services, so they gave me the billing address. Want to write this down?" Roy wrote down the address Jules provided. Dr. Rowan Kane. The name was familiar, but Roy couldn't place it immediately. "One more thing," Jules continued. "The woman who placed the order specifically asked about delivery instructions. Wanted to make sure the cake stayed refrigerated during transport. Asked about timing for maximum freshness. Very detailed questions for someone just sending a gift." After hanging up, Roy searched for Dr. Rowan Kane online. Emergency room physician at Mercy General Hospital. 40 years old, graduated from OHSU Medical School, clean record with the state medical board. Photos showed a tall man with graying hair and the kind of confident smile that worked well with patients. Roy scrolled through the results until he found something that made his stomach drop. A Society page photo from 18 months ago. Dr. Rowan Kane at a medical charity fundraiser, standing next to a woman identified in the caption as family friend May Holloway. May's maiden name, before she married Roy. The photo was dated 6 months before May's first special dinner that left Roy sick. Roy called Haley Tran at her desk across the office. "Can you come to my office? I need your help with something." Haley appeared 5 minutes later, closing the door behind her. At 36, she was the most technically skilled person in the company, capable of solving problems that frustrated people twice her age. She was also observant in ways that made her valuable beyond her official job description. "What do you need?" Roy showed her the photo on his computer screen. "I need to know everything you can find about Dr. Rowan Kane. Medical practice, finances, personal life, connections to anyone named May Holloway or May Vexler." Haley studied the screen. "This is about your ex-wife." It wasn't a question. Haley had always been perceptive about office dynamics and personal situations. "Yes. How deep do you want me to go?" "As deep as necessary." "And Haley? This stays between us." "Understood." Within 3 hours, Haley had compiled a comprehensive report. Dr. Rowan Kane was married to Talia Kane, a software engineer who worked remotely for a Seattle company. No children. The couple had been married 8 years, but had been living separately for the past 6 months. Dr. Kane maintained an apartment near the hospital while his wife remained in their house in the suburbs. More importantly, Haley had found financial records that painted an interesting picture. Dr. Kane had made several unusual transactions over the past year: cash withdrawals and roundabouts, transfers to accounts that didn't match any known bills or investments, and credit card purchases that seemed out of character for someone with his lifestyle. "Look at this," Haley pointed to her screen. $300 charges at hotels where he doesn't appear to have stayed overnight. Jewelry purchases that don't match his wife's taste. based on her social media photos. Restaurant bills for expensive places during times when his wife was posting about being home alone. Someone else. That would be my conclusion. And look at this, he's been paying for a storage unit across town for the past 4 months. Monthly automatic payment. Roy absorbed this information. Dr. Rowan Kane was having an affair, spending money on someone who wasn't his wife, and had somehow become involved with May. The storage unit suggested planning, preparation, secrecy. Can you find out anything about the storage unit? I can try, but that might require more creative methods. Roy understood. Do what you think is safe. Roy. Haley's voice was careful. What exactly are you trying to prove? That my ex-wife tried to kill me. Haley blinked, then nodded slowly. Okay, give me another hour. That evening, Roy sat in his car outside May's sister's house, where May had been staying since their separation. He'd been watching for 20 minutes when May emerged, carrying the yoga bag she'd left at their house months ago. Roy had spent the afternoon with Haley, who'd acquired a small recording device from sources she didn't explain. The device was smaller than a coin, with enough battery life for 48 hours and the ability to transmit audio to Roy's phone. When May had collected some of her remaining belongings from the house last week, Roy had planted the device in the inner pocket of her yoga bag, the one she never cleaned out, where she kept spare hair ties and lip balm and receipts she forgot to remove. Now he followed her car through downtown Portland, keeping enough distance to avoid detection. May drove to a coffee shop, then to a grocery store, then to an apartment complex Roy didn't recognize. She parked and walked to Building C, Unit 15. Roy noted the address and waited 30 minutes later. His phone buzzed with an incoming audio transmission. May's voice, clearer than he'd expected. I don't understand what went wrong. A man's voice, deeper, with the kind of controlled tone doctors use with difficult patients. You said he would eat it himself. He should have. Roy always eats dessert after dinner, especially chocolate. I calculated the timing based on his schedule, but he didn't. His mother ate most of it instead. The old, which has always been greedy with sweets. Roy's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His mother, who'd raised him alone after his father died, who'd worked double shifts to put him through college, who'd spent yesterday in an emergency room because of May's poison. The man's voice continued. How much did she consume? Roy said she ate most of the cake. 3 slices, maybe 4. Plus wine. That dosage, combined with alcohol, she's lucky to be alive. I know that. May's voice was sharp with frustration. I researched the interaction extensively. The amount was supposed to incapacitate, not kill. But it was measured for Roy's body weight, not some 66-year-old woman. May, you need to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down, Rowan. This was supposed to be simple. Roy eats the cake, feels unwell, maybe passes out. I come back to check on him, find him unconscious, call for help. You respond, as the attending physician, pronounce it a cardiac event brought on by stress from our separation. Roy closed his eyes, absorbing the full scope of their plan. Not just murder, but an elaborate setup designed to make May look like the concerned ex-wife, and Rowan the heroic doctor who tried to save him, but Rowan's voice was tighter now. The plan was flawed from the beginning. Too many variables, too much that could go wrong. It would have worked if Roy had eaten it himself like he was supposed to. What if his mother talks? What if she remembers what she ate before getting sick? She won't remember anything useful. Old people get confused about medical episodes. Besides, who's going to believe someone intentionally poisoned a birthday cake? It sounds paranoid. Roy opened his phone's recording app and saved the audio transmission to a secure file. May and Dr. Rowan Kane, discussing how they tried to kill him and make it look like natural causes. We need to try again, May continued. Soon, before suspicion dies down completely. Absolutely not. The risks are too high now. Rowan, we've planned this for months. I left him, filed for separation, established a pattern of marital problems. Everything is in place for me to inherit as his surviving spouse. Separated spouse. That might complicate things legally. I consulted with a lawyer. Separated spouses still inherit, unless there's a will specifying otherwise. Roy never made a will. He always said we had plenty of time for that. Another piece of May's calculation. Roy had indeed never written a will, assuming they had decades to worry about such things. May had known this and planned accordingly. Next time, We use the wine, May said. Easier to control dosage. And Roy drinks wine every Friday when he cooks dinner. I'll suggest we meet to discuss reconciliation. Bring a bottle as a peace offering. May, you're talking about murder. I'm talking about starting our life together. You said you wanted to leave Talia, wanted us to be together openly. This is the only way that happens without destroying your career or reputation. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. The dose should have worked. He was supposed to be incapacitated when you returned. I know, but we'll adjust. Learn from this mistake. What about his mother? If she suspects anything, Darla Vexler is a tough old bird, but she's not stupid enough to accuse someone of attempted murder without proof. She'll complain and suspicious, but that's all. May was wrong about that. Darla wasn't suspicious, she was certain. And Roy now had proof. The conversation continued for another 15 minutes, covering details about timing, dosage adjustments, and contingency plans. By the time May left the apartment, Roy had recorded enough evidence to destroy both of them. But he wasn't finished gathering information. May had underestimated him once. He wouldn't let it happen again. Roy's phone rang at work the next morning. Unknown number with a local area code. This is Roy Vexler. Mr. Vexler, this is Talia Kane. I believe you know my husband. Roy felt his pulse quicken. I'm not sure I understand. Dr. Rowan Kane, I think we should meet. I have information you might find interesting about your ex-wife. They agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, somewhere public, but not too crowded. Roy arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table near the back, where they could talk without being overheard. Talia Kane was smaller than Roy had expected from her photos, with dark hair and sharp eyes that reminded him of his mother. She carried herself with the kind of controlled precision that suggested she was used to solving complex problems. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said, sitting across from him. "How did you get my number?" "Phone records. Rowan's been calling you regularly, though he doesn't know I know that." Talia opened a folder and slid a photograph across the table. This was taken 6 months ago. The photo showed May and Rowan at a restaurant, sitting close together, May's hand on Rowan's arm. They looked comfortable, intimate, like a couple who'd been together for a while. "Where did you get this?" "Private investigator. I hired him when Rowan started acting strangely last year. Unexplained absences, unusual expenses, changes in behavior." Talia's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she was discussing a work project. "I'm a software engineer, Mr. Vexler. I solve problems by gathering data and analyzing patterns." Roy understood. "What patterns did you find?" Talia pulled out more documents. Financial records showing transfers from Rowan's accounts to various recipients. Hotel bills, restaurant charges, jewelry purchases, and this. She handed him a bank statement with several highlighted entries. $12,000 transferred to your ex-wife over the past 6 months. Small amounts, irregular timing, designed to avoid detection. Roy studied the numbers. May's sudden interest in their finances made more sense now. She'd been receiving money from her lover while planning Roy's murder. "There's more," Talia continued. "I found documentation for a life insurance policy application in your name, filed by May Holloway, her maiden name. The policy was for $500,000. I never applied for life insurance." "I know. The application was rejected because the medical exam showed discrepancies with the information provided, but may try to take out a policy on your life without your knowledge." Roy felt pieces clicking into place. May hadn't just planned to kill him, she'd tried to profit from it significantly. "Why are you telling me this?" Talia's expression hardened. "Because I want to destroy both of them. Rowan thinks he's clever, thinks I don't know about his affair or his plans. May thinks she's found her ticket to a new life. They're both wrong." "What kind of plans?" "I've been monitoring Rowan's communications. Text messages, emails, phone calls. Your ex-wife promised him she would take care of you, so they could start fresh together. She told him you were the only obstacle to their happiness." Roy absorbed this. May had convinced Rowan that Roy was the problem, that eliminating him was the solution to their relationship issues. "I have recordings," Roy said. Talia raised an eyebrow. "What kind of recordings?" "May and your husband discussing how they try to poison me, planning their next attempt." "How did you get recordings?" Roy explained about the device in May's yoga bag, the audio transmissions, the details of their conversation. Talia listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. They're planning to try again, Roy concluded. I know. Rowan's been researching cardiac medications and their interactions with alcohol. He thinks I don't know how to access his browsing history. They sat in silence for a moment, two people whose spouses had betrayed them in the most fundamental way possible. What do you want to do? Roy asked. I want them both in prison. Rowan will lose his medical license, his reputation, his freedom. May will lose everything she thought she was gaining by leaving you. You have enough evidence. Talia smiled, and Roy saw something cold and calculating in her expression. Mr. Vexler, I've been gathering evidence for months. Between what I have and what you've just told me, we have enough to destroy them both. The question is whether you're willing to help me do it. Roy thought about his mother in the emergency room, about May's voice on the recording discussing his murder as casually as planning a dinner party, about years of marriage to someone who'd been planning to kill him. What do you need? Over the next week, Roy and Talia worked together with methodical precision. Roy provided the audio recordings of May and Rowan's conversations. Talia contributed financial records, photographs, communication logs, and documented evidence of the attempted insurance fraud. Haley helped compile everything into organized files, creating a timeline that clearly showed the progression from affair to murder plot. Jules contributed additional information about the bakery order and payment details. The evidence was overwhelming. Audio recordings of May and Rowan discussing the poisoning attempt and planning another one, the hospital toxicology reports showing digoxin in Darla's blood. Financial records showing payments from Rowan to May. The fraudulent life insurance application. Photography and documentation of May and Rowan's relationship. Credit card records showing Rowan paid for the poisoned cake. Communication. Records between May and Rowan discussing taking care of Roy. Roy had learned patience from years in logistics, where rushing led to mistakes and missed details. This situation required the same careful approach. Every piece of evidence needed to be documented, verified, and organized for maximum impact. We should send this to the police, Talia said during one of their meetings. Not just the police, Roy replied. We send it everywhere at once. Police, district attorney, medical board, reporters. Make it impossible for anyone to cover up or ignore. Why reporters? Because May thinks she's smart enough to manipulate the legal system. She's been planning this for months, probably has explanations ready for every piece of evidence. But she can't control public opinion, and Rowan can't practice medicine if his reputation is destroyed. Haley had researched the best approach for submitting evidence to multiple agencies simultaneously. Anonymous tips to the district attorney's office, the state medical board, and the hospital where Rowan worked. Copies of everything sent to investigative reporters at local newspapers and television stations. What about May? Talia asked. She's going to know you're behind this. Good, Roy said. I want her to know. On Thursday morning, Roy and Talia executed their plan. Using anonymous email accounts and untraceable communication methods, they sent complete evidence packages to 7 different recipients. The Portland Police Bureau, the Multnomah County District Attorney, the Oregon Medical Board, Mercy General Hospital Administration, and 3 journalists known for investigative reporting. Each package included a cover letter explaining the situation and identifying key evidence, full audio recordings with transcripts, financial documentation showing payments, an insurance fraud, medical reports from Darla's emergency room visit, photographs and timeline of May and Rowan's relationship, documentation of the cake order and payment. Roy spent Thursday evening at home, cooking dinner and waiting. May had called twice that week suggesting they meet to discuss working things out, but Roy had politely declined. No need to rush into whatever trap she was planning when a much larger trap was already closing around her. Friday morning, Roy's phone rang. Jules calling from his office. Turn on Channel 8 News, Jules said. Right now. Roy found the remote and switched to the local morning show. A reporter was standing outside Mercy General Hospital, holding a microphone and speaking directly to the camera. Investigation into allegations that an emergency room physician conspired with a woman to poison her estranged husband. Dr. Rowan Kane has been suspended pending a criminal investigation and review by the state medical board. The screen showed a photo of Rowan, then switched to a photo of May that looked like it had been taken from social media. May Holloway Vexler allegedly worked with Dr. Kane to administer heart medication through food with the apparent intent to incapacitate or harm her husband. The plot was discovered when Vexler's mother consumed the tainted food instead and required emergency medical treatment. Roy watched as his private nightmare became public knowledge. Part of him felt exposed, vulnerable, as if his personal business was being dissected by strangers. The larger part felt satisfied. May had counted on secrecy, on people not believing such an outrageous story, on her ability to manipulate the situation. She no longer controlled the narrative. His phone rang. May calling? Roy answered on the fourth ring. Hello, May. Roy. Her voice was different, tight, controlled, but with an underlying panic she couldn't quite hide. We need to talk. About what? About this insane story on the news. Someone is spreading lies about me, about us. I think we're both being set up. May was trying to position herself as a fellow victim, someone who was being framed along with Roy. Classic manipulation technique. Set up by who? I don't know, but someone wants to destroy both our reputations. Roy, you know me. You know I would never hurt you or your mother. Roy almost smiled. May was good at this, had always been skilled at making people believe what she wanted them to believe. But she was working from incomplete information now, try to manipulate a situation she didn't understand. The police want to talk to me, May continued. I think they want to talk to you too. We should coordinate our stories, make sure we present a united front against these accusations. What story should we coordinate, May? The truth, that we're separated but trying to work things out. That someone sent you a cake as a gesture of goodwill, and your mother got sick from something unrelated. That these allegations are completely false. Roy waited, letting May dig herself deeper. Roy, are you still there? I'm here. Will you meet with me? Before we talk to the police? I think if we present a united front, we can get through this together. I don't think that's a good idea, May. Why not? Roy, this affects both of us. If people believe these lies, it could destroy both our lives. Only one of our lives deserves to be destroyed. Silence. What do you mean? I mean, I know what you did, May. I know about Rowan, about the cake, about your plan to kill me. I know about the insurance policy, the money transfers, all of it. More silence. When May spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculating. I have no idea what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Roy, someone is feeding you lies, making you paranoid. This is exactly what they want for us to turn against each other. May, what? Stop lying. It's over. Roy hung up. His phone immediately started ringing again. May calling back. Roy declined the call and blocked her number. Outside, the ordinary world continued. People going to work, children walking to school. Life proceeding normally for everyone except the two people whose carefully constructed plans were collapsing around them. Roy felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but the calm that comes from finally understanding a complex situation and taking appropriate action. May had tried to kill him. She'd poisoned his mother instead. She'd planned to inherit his money and start a new life with her lover. Now she would face the consequences. The knock came at May's sister's door at 6:15 a.m. on Monday morning. May had been awake for hours, pacing through the small guest bedroom where she'd been staying, checking news websites and making phone calls to lawyers who weren't returning her messages. Through the bedroom window, she could see the police cars in the driveway. 2 marked units and an unmarked sedan, their presence announcing to the entire neighborhood that something serious was happening. That May's sister Jennifer answered the door in her bathrobe, voice muffled through the walls. She's here, but she's still sleeping. Ma'am, we have a warrant for May Holloway Vexler's arrest. We need to speak with her immediately. May closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She'd known this was coming since the news report started, but knowing and experiencing were different things. She'd spent the weekend crafting explanations, preparing responses, building a strategy for handling police questions. None of it mattered now. She opened the bedroom door and walked to the living room where 3 detectives waited. 2 men and a woman, all wearing expressions of professional seriousness that told May they weren't here for preliminary questions. May Holloway Vexler. Yes. You're under arrest for attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. The words washed over May as she processed what was happening. Attempted murder in the first degree meant they believed she tried to kill Roy with premeditation and planning. Conspiracy meant they knew about Rowan. Fraud meant they'd found the insurance application. A.S. The detective read her rights. May's mind raced through possible responses. Deny everything. Claim she was being framed. Suggest that Roy had set her up out of spite over their separation. But as the second detective pulled out a folder and began laying out photographs on Jennifer's coffee table, May realized how much evidence they had, photos of her with Rowan at restaurants. Financial records showing money transfers. Copies of the insurance application. And then, worst of all, printed transcripts of conversations she remembered having with Rowan about dosages and timing and contingency plans. How'd you get these? May asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ma'am, you'll have an opportunity to discuss that with your attorney. They handcuffed her gently, but firmly, treating her with the professional courtesy reserved for white-collar criminals who weren't considered flight risks. No violence, no drama, just the efficient processing of someone who'd been caught committing serious crimes. As they led her to the car, May caught sight of neighbors watching from windows and doorways. News vans were already arriving, drawn by scanner reports and tip-off from sources in the police department. May had always prided herself on maintaining appearances, on being the kind of woman who looked successful and sophisticated and in control. Now, she was being perp-walked in front of television cameras, wearing yesterday's clothes and handcuffs, in the back of the police car. May tried to think strategically. The evidence looked bad, but she'd been planning for this possibility. She had explanations ready for most of it. The financial transfers could be explained as loans. The insurance application as a misunderstanding. The photographs as evidence of friendship, not an affair. The audio recordings were more problematic, but May had been careful in her word choices. She talked about taking care of Roy, which could mean many things. She discussed medical information, but that could be innocent conversation with a doctor friend. That it wasn't until the detective played one of the recordings in the interview room that May understood how trapped she was. Her own voice, clear and unmistakable. The amount was supposed to incapacitate, not kill. But it was measured for Roy's body weight, not some 66-year-old woman. Rowan's voice responding. That dosage combined with alcohol, she's lucky to be alive. May listened to herself discuss poisoning Roy with the same tone she might use to discuss a recipe. Clinical, detailed, matter of fact. This isn't what it sounds like, May said when the recording ended. The detective, a woman about May's age with tired eyes and a patient expression, looked at her with something approaching pity. Ma'am, what do you think it sounds like? May tried to speak, to explain, to create some version of events that didn't involve attempted murder. But listening to her own words, hearing the casual way she discussed killing the man she'd been married to for 5 years, May finally understood that no explanation would work. She'd been planning Roy's death for months, and she'd been recorded discussing those plans in detail. I want a lawyer, May said. That's probably a good idea, the detective replied to Dr. Rowan Kane's world collapsed on Tuesday morning while he was reviewing patient charts in the emergency room break room. The hospital administrator appeared with 2 security guards and a representative from the state medical board. Dr. Kane, you're being suspended immediately pending the outcome of criminal charges. Please gather your personal belongings and surrender your hospital ID and access cards. Rowan had been expecting this since May's arrest made the news, but the reality was still jarring. 15 years of medical practice, hundreds of lives saved, a reputation built through careful work and professional dedication, all destroyed because of his relationship with May. I haven't been convicted of anything, Rowan said. The allegations are sufficient for immediate suspension under hospital policy. You'll have an opportunity to appeal through proper channels. Rowan looked around the break room, where he'd spent countless hours over the past 8 years. His colleagues were watching, some with curiosity, others with the uncomfortable expressions people wore when witnessing someone else's professional destruction. Doctor Sarah Morrison, who'd worked with Rowan for 6 years, approached him as he cleared out his locker. "Rowan, what the hell happened? The news reports, they can't be true." Rowan considered his options. Deny everything, claim he was being framed, suggest that the evidence was fabricated or misinterpreted. But Rowan was a doctor trained to deal with facts and evidence. The audio recordings didn't lie. The financial transfers were real. His own voice discussing dosages and cardiac interactions with a woman who tried to poison her husband couldn't be explained away. "Sarah, I made some very bad decisions." "Bad decisions?" "Rowan, they're saying you helped someone try to commit murder." "I know what they're saying." Dr. Morrison stared at him, processing the implications of his non-denial. "My God, Rowan, what were you thinking?" That was the question Rowan had been asking himself since May's arrest. What had he been thinking? How had a rational, educated, successful professional become involved in a plot to kill someone? The answer was simple and humiliating. He hadn't been thinking. He'd been feeling, allowing emotions and desires to override his judgment. May had convinced him that Roy was the obstacle to their happiness, that removing him was the only solution to their problems. May had made it sound reasonable, even necessary. Roy was controlling, she'd said, emotionally abusive. May was trapped in a marriage that was destroying her, and Roy would never agree to a divorce that left her financially secure. Rowan had believed her because he'd wanted to believe her. Because the alternative that May was manipulating him into committing murder was too terrible to consider. Now, listening to the audio recordings played on news reports, Rowan could hear what he'd been blind to before. May's voice discussing Roy's death with the detached calculation of someone planning a business transaction. No emotion, no regret, no indication that she was talking about ending a human life. Rowan had been used, manipulated by someone who was far more skilled at deception than he'd realized. But that didn't absolve him of responsibility. He was a doctor, sworn to preserve life, and he'd helped plan the opposite. By Wednesday, the state medical board had begun formal proceedings to revoke Rowan's license. By Thursday, 3 former patients had filed malpractice suits claiming that his criminal charges cast doubt on the care they'd received. By Friday, Rowan's malpractice insurance company had dropped him. Talia filed for divorce that week, accompanied by a motion for full custody of all marital assets and a restraining order preventing Rowan from contacting her. Her attorney was efficient and thorough, presenting evidence of adultery, criminal conspiracy, and financial fraud that made Rowan's position indefensible. "I trusted you," Talia said during their one conversation before the restraining order took effect. "I thought you were a good person who'd made some mistakes. I didn't realize you were a monster." Rowan wanted to argue, to explain, to make her understand that he'd never intended for things to go so far. But the audio recordings spoke for themselves. Whatever his intentions, he'd participated in planning Roy Vexler's murder. By the following week, local medical professionals were publicly distancing themselves from Rowan. Medical conferences removed him from speaking schedules. Professional organizations suspended his memberships. Colleagues who'd worked with him for years refused to return his calls. Dr. Rowan Kane had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly a professional reputation could be destroyed by personal choices. The trial began 4 months later in a courtroom packed with reporters, medical professionals, and curious observers drawn by the sensational nature of the case. May had hired an expensive defense attorney who specialized in white-collar crime, someone skilled at creating reasonable doubt and shifting blame. Roy sat in the front row with his mother, who'd insisted on attending despite his concerns about the stress. Darla wore her best dress and the expression she'd perfected during 40 years of dealing with difficult patients and their families. "I want to see her face when they play those recordings," Darla said. "I want to watch her try to explain why she discussed poisoning my son like she was planning a dinner party." May's attorney had built her defense around 3 main arguments. The audio recordings were taken out of context. The financial transfers were innocent loans between friends, and May was herself a victim of Rowan's manipulation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the defense attorney said during opening statements, "you will hear recordings that sound damaging when played without context. But you must remember that these conversations were recorded secretly, without May's knowledge, by a husband who was seeking revenge for their failed marriage. Roy watched May during the opening statements. She'd lost weight since her arrest, and her usually perfect appearance showed signs of stress. But her expression remained controlled, almost serene, as if she was confident in her ability to convince the jury of her innocence. The prosecution's case was methodical and comprehensive. They played the audio recordings in their entirety, presented financial evidence, called expert witnesses to explain digoxin and its effects, and walked the jury through the timeline of May's relationship with Rowan. The most damaging moment came when the prosecutor played the recording of May discussing dosage calculations. May's voice filled the courtroom. The amount was supposed to incapacitate, not kill. But it was measured for Roy's body weight, not some 66-year-old woman. The prosecutor paused the recording and looked at the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard the defendant admit that she calculated a specific dosage of heart medication intended to harm her husband. She measured it according to his body weight to achieve a particular effect. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was attempted murder with scientific precision. May's attorney tried to create alternative explanations during cross-examination, but the evidence was too comprehensive. The recordings, the financial transfers, the insurance application, the hospital records, everything painted a clear picture of premeditation and conspiracy. When May took the stand in her own defense, Roy watched her employ every manipulation technique he'd seen during their marriage. The tearful explanations, the claims of being misunderstood, the attempts to portray herself as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. I never intended to hurt anyone, May testified. The conversations with Dr. Kane were taken completely out of context. We were discussing my concerns about Roy's health, not planning to harm him. The prosecutor's cross-examination was devastating. Ms. Vexler, you testified that your conversations with Dr. Kane were about your concerns for your husband's health. Is that correct? Yes. Yet in these recordings, you discuss calculating dosages based on your husband's body weight. Can you explain why someone concerned about health would be calculating drug dosages? May hesitated. I was trying to understand the medical information Dr. Kane was providing. I see. And can you explain why someone concerned about her husband's health would attempt to take out a life insurance policy on him without his knowledge? That was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that would have paid you $500,000 upon your husband's death. May's explanations became increasingly desperate as the prosecutor systematically destroyed her credibility. By the time cross-examination ended, it was clear that the jury had stopped believing anything she said. Rowan's testimony was brief and damaging. Facing his own criminal charges, he'd accepted a plea agreement in exchange for cooperation with the prosecution. His testimony confirmed the conspiracy, the planning, and May's role as the primary organizer. She convinced me that Roy was abusive, Rowan testified. She said he was controlling and violent, that she was trapped and needed help. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Did Ms. Vexler ever suggest that you should help her harm her husband? Yes. She said Roy was the only obstacle to our being together, and that we needed to take care of the situation. What did you understand that to mean? At first, I thought she meant divorce. But over time, it became clear she was talking about something more permanent. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. As the judge read the verdict, May's composure finally cracked. She began crying, not the calculated tears of someone seeking sympathy, but the genuine despair of someone who'd gambled everything and lost. The judge's sentencing was thorough and unsympathetic. Ms. Vexler, you have been convicted of attempting to murder your husband for financial gain. This was not a crime of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, premeditated conspiracy that you planned and executed over a period of months. May stood for sentencing, wearing the same controlled expression she'd maintained throughout the trial, but Roy could see the defeat in her posture. You manipulated a medical professional into participating in your scheme. You attempted to defraud an insurance company. You poisoned an innocent woman who could have died as a result of your actions. The court finds these actions to be among the most serious crimes possible. The judge paused, looking directly at May. Attempted murder for financial gain carries a potential sentence of 25 years to life. However, considering the specific circumstances of this case and your lack of prior criminal history, the court sentences you to 16 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 11 years. May's legs buckled slightly, and her attorney had to steady her. 16 years. She would be 55 when she became eligible for parole, assuming she qualified. Roy felt no satisfaction in watching May's collapse. No pleasure in her tears, or her shock, or her obvious despair. He felt something colder and more final. Justice. May had tried to kill him. She'd poisoned his mother. She'd planned to inherit his money and start a new life with her lover. Now she would spend the next decade and a half in prison, thinking about the choices that had brought her there. Roy walked out of the courthouse with his mother, ignoring the reporters who shouted questions and thrust microphones toward them. The late afternoon sun felt warm after hours in the air-conditioned courtroom, and Roy found himself appreciating simple things like fresh air and freedom. Mr. Vexler, can you comment on the verdict? How do you feel about your ex-wife's sentence? Do you plan to pursue civil action? Roy stopped walking and turned toward the cluster of reporters. For months, they'd covered his private tragedy as entertainment, dissecting his marriage and May's crimes for public consumption. He'd remained silent throughout the trial, letting the evidence speak for itself. Now he had something to say. She tried. She failed. Permanently. That was all. 5 words that summarized everything. May's attempt to kill him, her failure to accomplish it, and the permanent consequences of her actions. Roy continued walking toward his car, leaving the reporters to analyze his brief statement for hidden meaning or emotional content. There was neither. May had tried to murder him, failed, and would now spend 16 years in prison. The situation was resolved. Darla walked beside him in comfortable silence until they reached the parking garage. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine." "Really? Your ex-wife just got sentenced to 16 years in prison for trying to kill you. It's okay to have feelings about that." Roy considered her question seriously. How did he feel? Relief that May could no longer threaten him. Satisfaction that justice had been served. Regret that he'd been married to someone capable of such calculated evil. But no anger. No desire for revenge beyond what the legal system had already provided. No emotional turmoil or psychological trauma. "I feel like a problem has been solved," Roy said finally. Darla studied his face. "That's it? A problem solved?" May made a series of choices. Those choices had consequences. She's now facing those consequences. The situation is resolved. Roy, normal people would be angry, or hurt, or traumatized. I was married to May for 5 years. I learned not to waste energy on emotions that don't solve problems. They drove home in silence, both processing the end of a situation that had dominated their lives for months. The trial was over. May was going to prison, and life could return to normal patterns. But Roy knew that normal would be different now. He'd learned things about trust, about judgment, about the capacity for evil in people who seemed ordinary. May had looked like a loving wife while planning his murder. Dr. Rowan Kane had looked like a respectable professional while helping her do it. Appearances meant nothing. Actions meant everything. 6 months after May's sentencing, Roy hosted a small gathering at his house. Nothing elaborate, just Darla, Jules, Haley, and a few other friends who'd supported him through the worst period of his life. Roy had made dinner himself, something he'd started doing regularly since May left. Cooking was meditative, requiring attention and precision, but allowing his mind to work through other problems. Tonight he'd prepared his mother's recipe for beef stew, served with fresh bread and a simple salad. For dessert, he'd made chocolate cake from scratch. Not the elaborate creation May had sent him, but something honest and straightforward that tasted like what it was supposed to be. "This is excellent," Haley said, finishing her slice. "I didn't know you could bake." May never let him cook, Darla explained. Said he was too messy, too slow. Turns out he's been a good cook all along. Roy cut himself a small piece and ate it slowly, appreciating flavors that weren't designed to mask poison or manipulate his emotions. Simple chocolate cake, made with ingredients he'd chosen and prepared with his own hands. Jules raised his beer bottle. To endings that matter. The others joined the toast, and Roy felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine contentment. Not happiness, exactly, but the satisfaction that came from surviving something difficult and coming out stronger. After his friends left, Roy and Darla cleaned the kitchen together, falling into the comfortable routine they'd developed since May's departure. Darla washed, Roy dried, both of them working efficiently without unnecessary conversation. "Save me a piece of that cake for tomorrow," Darla said as Roy put the remaining dessert in the refrigerator. "There's plenty left." Roy cut one final slice and walked to the fireplace. He tossed it into the flames, where it caught quickly and burned bright for a few seconds before disappearing into ash. "What was that for?" Darla asked. "That one was for May." Darla nodded approvingly. "Waste of good chocolate, but I understand the sentiment." Roy watched the flames consume the last trace of cake, thinking about justice and consequences and the permanent nature of certain choices. May would spend the next 11 years thinking about the slice of cake she'd sent him, the poison she'd calculated so carefully, the plan that had failed so completely that she'd tried to end his life. Instead, she'd ended her own freedom. Roy found that outcome satisfactory. May Holloway Vexler adjusted to prison life with the same calculating efficiency she'd applied to everything else. She kept to herself, avoided conflicts, and earned a reputation as a quiet inmate who caused no trouble for guards or other prisoners. She received no visitors, no letters, no phone calls. Roy had blocked all contact, and May's family had distanced themselves after learning the full scope of her crimes. Her sister Jennifer had testified at the trial about May's behavior in the weeks before her arrest, the strange phone calls, the obsession with news reports, the complete lack of remorse for what had happened to Darla. Dr. Rowan Kane served 18 months in minimum security prison before being released on parole. His medical license was permanently revoked, and he worked various jobs: warehouse clerk, insurance adjuster, night security guard that didn't require professional credentials or public trust. He never practiced medicine again. Talia Kane received everything in their divorce settlement and used some of the money to start a non-profit organization focused on supporting victims of domestic violence and manipulation. She never remarried, finding satisfaction in work that helped other people escape dangerous relationships. Roy Vexler returned to his normal life with one significant change. He never ignored his instincts again. If something felt wrong, he investigated. If someone's story didn't match their actions, he paid attention. If patterns emerged that suggested deception, he acted on that information, but he didn't remarry. Not because he was traumatized or afraid of commitment, but because he'd learned to appreciate solitude and self-sufficiency. Marriage to May had taught him that being alone was better than being with someone who wished you were dead. Some victories, Roy had learned, were too personal to share with anyone except the people who'd helped you survive them. And some endings were exactly what they needed to be: permanent.